Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to another episode of Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am joined today by Rob Henderson.
Hello.
And myself, Brian Black. Today we are going to be talking about home invasions.
Surviving them, not necessarily how to do them.
Not necessarily how to conduct your own home invasion, more surviving them. So I wanted to, kind of briefly run through just some kind of a mental checklist for kind of what to do to prepare for that kind of situation if you're ever confronted with that. And this is good education too, not only to take in for yourself and your family, but to share with others too. And that's kind of the goal with this information too. And if you've been reading ITS since 2009, this has been a pretty big topic for us over the years. I'm pretty passionate about trying to help everyone understand that this stuff does happen. It absolutely does. It's not something that is like getting struck by lightning. It occurs quite often. And the tough part about it is that it's not as though, if you look at crime statistics, it's not like home invasion shows up. It's usually a breaking and entering, or it's a kidnapping, or it's something like that. But home invasion isn't necessarily its own category that you can really like track down. Like you look at crime reports, like, oh, there was 2 home invasions a day in this city. Well, so
because it ends up in the ultimate crime, which is burglary, or if there's a murder or something like that, it's the end game. So that's what it'll show up as.
And different law enforcement agencies have different ways of reporting that too, based on their own city ordinances and things like that too.
So it's hard to get unified statistics.
Right. It's not like gun statistics that the FBI tracks and things like that. So it'd be nice if that was a category. I mean, it's not nice that it's happening, obviously, but
being prepared.
Yeah, exactly. And by definition, home invasion means forcible entry to me, anyway. That's how I kind of classify that, as though someone's kicking your door and it's kind of a while you're home burglary, that type of thing. So,
entering the house without your permission while you're home.
Right.
Because I've had some where they'll pretend to be utility workers or something like that to get you to open the door to make it that much easier.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and really all security, man, if I was going to say how this starts or how this happens, it really comes back down to paying attention to the baseline in your neighborhood. And we've gone over this a little bit with home security, so there is some crossover here, those of you that listened to the episode that we did on that. So you may see some crossover, but it's because there is crossover with that. Sure. I mean, it's still your home, it's still your castle, someone's breaking into it. And more than likely, they've observed your patterns at one point or another, and they know when to hit you. So, most people aren't just walking through a neighborhood. Let me just try this house today. They're staking it out. They know what's going on. They know there might be good stuff inside, that type of deal. Whether that's looking what you're throwing away and saying, oh, hey, this guy's got a brand new TV. I should try to get in there and grab that. But and that's just it's having situational awareness. It's paying attention to your surroundings. It's establishing the baseline in wherever you live, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a home, whether it's a neighborhood, whatever. Notice what's coming and going and paying attention to that baseline. And when something's changing, be alert with that. Again, to go back to kind of the neighborhood perspective, knowing your neighbors isn't necessarily a bad thing. They can help you watch out for stuff like that, and you can kind of form your own support group to kind of help watch for those type of things.
I like that idea of creating a baseline, especially, if you don't know your neighbors, then it's harder for you to find out what's normal, what's not normal.
Sure.
Or what's out of place.
Exactly. And, it's not like you need to be keeping tabs on your neighbors and writing down their comings and goings, but at the same time, being aware of what kind of cars they drive, what commonly happens at their house, on a day-to-day basis. And honestly, most people were at work during the day, and that's typically when a lot of burglaries and home invasions and things like that happen anyway. And the difference between a burglary and a home invasion could just be the thief didn't know you were home.
Right.
So,
well, and I think that's why a lot of the home invasions that we see are particularly violent, because that's someone that has made the choice to come in when you are home and not while you're gone. So if it is somebody that's been observing you and they just want your stuff, they're more likely to wait, like you said, till during the day so they can get in and get it. But sometimes when they kick the door down, they don't know somebody's there.
Yeah.
So you're still in the same position.
Well, and the gist of it is that, at least in my opinion, I feel that most burglars don't want you there in the first place.
Right.
So they may kick in a door and hear you scream or hear something happen, hear a shotgun cocking for all they know, and they might just turn around and leave. So
that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario. But, I mean, if you were to kind of to wrap this up as a whole in terms of layers of what a home invasion consists of, first is the situational awareness aspect of it. They're going to, more than likely, if this is a dedicated, premeditated home invasion, they want you there, they want to take you captive, they want to harm you in some way, they are going to be watching for when you're home. So there's more than likely going to be, some kind of roving patrol, someone's been staked out in a car watching your home, that type of thing. So there was just, funny enough, there was just I'm on Nextdoor, which is that social network for neighborhoods and stuff, and someone posted today, they said someone was sleeping out in a car in the street, and they noticed it, and I was like, that's kind of funny. It could just be someone with a bad hangover nursing it in the morning. But, again, it could be someone that was watching a house all night.
Right.
So you never know.
No harm in being aware.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that was good. That's exactly the kind of thing that I love seeing on Nextdoor, is neighbors looking out for each other by making a post like that to say, hey, FYI, there's a car parked here. This is the license plate. This is the make and model of the car. There's somebody sleeping in it. Just thought everyone should be aware. Like,
and there's a great record to have.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess if, we were going to kind of break this down a little bit, the other option, or the other type of thing that could happen too, is you're forcibly taken to your home. You're in a parking lot, you're in a parking garage, you're coming out of a grocery store, and you get, held against your will and forced to come back to your home. That's something that could occur too. And in that situation, something that you could do within your home to protect against that is to have a monitored alarm system with a distress code, so that you can, you always set your alarm when you leave. That way, if you're forced back into your house and you turn off the alarm, you enter that distress code, which disables the alarm but alerts, the alarm company that this
and everything
is a distress
operates
signal.
normally when you put it in. It disables the system. The beeps are all the same, but it then sends that distress call. Yeah,
so that's an option. The other thing too is breaking that down even further. If you are a victim of a home invasion, having weapons and things to use against somebody like that stashed in places would be beneficial too. I mean, if you kind of think about it, if you kind of take a look at your home and you think, okay, again, red teaming the situation, you look at your home through the eyes of a burglar, and defensive measures outside of this, really, I'll get into that in a little bit, which, talking about anti-kick devices and things like that on doors and things like that. But if, the burglar does gain entry into your home, looking at those places where you might be taken captive and put at, whether that's thrown on a bed, thrown on a couch, put in a chair, that type of stuff. So kind of reversing that and thinking, okay, well, where are the places that I could stash things to help with something like that? That's a consideration too. And just, having weapons around the house too, and obviously keeping in mind child safety and things like that, and, access to firearms and things for children, because everybody needs to pay attention to that. But, having things locked up in the right places. But, that aside, having things within easy access and easy reach if somebody does do something like that is important too. Well, and having the training for that kind of stuff. I see a lot of people that have guns and go to the range occasionally, but they don't train for offhand shooting, they don't train for single hand shooting, and you may be crouched down protecting someone or leaning out from behind, whatever cover you find and you're in that situation, you're going to take. And so if you don't practice for that, then you're just that much less prepared. I agree. And even taking the time to do dry runs through your house at night in the dark, when you can't really see, when things aren't really clear or fuzzy to you, kind of getting getting to know your house so well that you can move around in the dark in it. And most people do. You know,
Sure.
you live in a house or a home long enough, you get to know the walls and how many steps it takes you to get to a wall and that type of stuff. So
and you can totally use that to your advantage. I mean, that's a huge advantage you have in that situation is you know where everything is.
Absolutely.
So you can kind of play with that.
Yep. And then kind of along those lines is, also kind of taking the time to learn some type of combatives or martial arts to be able to defend yourself and your family against something like that is kind of an important aspect of this too. And then, before we kind of get into the actual captivity portion of, breaking out of illegal restraint or something like that, which I do want to talk about, talking about the home again and back to buying time with security, that's an important part of this too, because if someone's trying to kick in your door and you can buy a few seconds to know that someone's trying to kick in your door before they're actually able to kick it in, that's huge. It gives you time to call 911. It gives you time to grab a gun. It gives you time to prepare yourself mentally for who you're going to face. There's so much inherent benefit in that you can't put a price on. So, when I've given security talks and I've talked to people about these different types of things and, they look at the cost for reinforcing a door. They look at the cost and like, look, man, what's your life worth? What's that benefit right there of the time that you would, have in being alerted for something like that? So it's a huge consideration too.
Well, and with stuff like the Door Devil, they're great additions, and it's also why you want to be sure that you have a peephole on the front door, because you don't want to be the person that opens the door to completely negate the door armor that you have by just opening the door. So you can get a peephole, and they have I think we've done a review on the peephole covers. So for people that are paranoid about people looking through, things like that, you can get
using
a cover.
A reverse peephole viewer.
Yeah, so you can have the best of both worlds. But being sure who's at the door before you answer it is super important.
That's why I really like the Ring doorbell too, and I know I've talked about that before, but I just used that the other day. I was home and somebody rang the doorbell, and it's a different world we live in today. It's like somebody rang my doorbell. Like, oh my God, I don't know, someone's not supposed to be here right now. But
was it dark? That's the worst.
No, it wasn't dark.
That's good.
So that was a good thing. But I talked to them through the door through the Ring. So meaning that the doorbell acts as not only a camera system that's recording video with motion detection, which is awesome, but it's also a two-way communication device. So there's not only a microphone but a speaker too. So you can literally sit there on your phone in the back of your house, on the toilet if you will, and answer the door and say, "What can I help you with?" And that's kind of what I did. I wasn't on the toilet or anything, but I said, "Can I help you?" And this was a guy that had a roofing shirt on, like a collared shirt, clipboard in his hand, that type of deal. Of course, I was immediately suspicious. Of course. I was like, who is this guy?
Sure.
And he said, hey, just wanted to let you know we're doing your neighbor's roof, and I just wanted to come by and, ask if you'd had anyone look at your roof with all the wind we've had lately. And I said, we're good. Thanks. Yep. And he goes, well, no. I was wondering if, I was like, we're good. Thanks. I appreciate you coming by. He's like, have a good one, man. And, he walked away very discouraged. But, it's one of those things. I'm not opening the door for him.
Right.
So.
Because you never know. Yep. I mean, I think a lot of people err on the side of, I don't want to be rude or something like that. But if a situation like this, like we're talking about, kicks off, your rudeness is the least of your concern.
I agree with that too. And that's a lot of what Gavin DeBecker says in his book Gift of Fear, which I would highly recommend.
Oh, absolutely.
It's one of my favorite books on the subject. If you take nothing from this podcast and all you do is go buy his book and read it, hey, you were 100% more prepared than you were yesterday. Yep. So it's a great book. Highly recommend it. I've read it probably 8 times myself, and I've tried to get my wife to read it as much as I can, but she's gotten maybe one chapter in and she puts it down.
I think people fear that they'll be more paranoid after they read it, because I've recommended it to a couple people, and that's kind of the reaction. It's like, well, I don't want to get all paranoid. But it doesn't give you that impression. It opens your eyes to stuff that's already happening.
Well, and he doesn't really he doesn't tout paranoia. What he touts is listening to your body's natural instinct. You know, it's the whole hair on the back of the neck standing up kind of situation. We've all been there. We've all been in a situation where we knew something wasn't right, but yet we walked into it anyway. And that's what he's trying to get people to be aware of, is like, hey, that's your body's natural instinct telling you that something's not right, and you need to listen to it.
Yeah.
So, I use the old, comparison of, hey, an elevator door opens up. There's a guy that is looking at you. You don't feel right about the situation. Do you get on the elevator? And most people are like, well, yeah, I didn't want to be offensive to the guy. I didn't want to make him think that I didn't want to ride with him because he's a creepy guy or something. So I made myself get on the elevator. And like, no, you knew the situation was bad, and you still got on the elevator. And that's the goal there, is to get you to look at that situation and be able to say, I'm not going to get on the elevator.
Well, and I think I think they call it survivor's bias, where all of the times where you have those interactions and nothing comes of it makes you complacent for the time that it actually does happen.
Yep.
And you do decide, like, no, I'm just being weird. I'll get in the elevator, you know, and then that's the one time, because it's not like it happens all the time. It's, probably a 1 in several 100,000 chance, but there's still a chance. And when it happens,
I didn't want to be rude and open the door.
Right.
Well, guess what?
Well, it got opened.
Yeah. So that's really what I want to emphasize, is that there's a lot of things you can do home security wise, which in the episode intel, to avoid just kind of having the same home security talk again, I'll encourage you to read the article on the home security assessment stuff that we put together, which I think is great content. I've been writing about home security stuff for, 8 years now. And I'm just very passionate about the subject. And it's the one thing that I feel like I can share with people that can touch everybody. It's just it's that powerful. If you can just increase your security footprint slightly, it's going to help immensely.
Absolutely.
So, and security is one of those things where you don't think you need it until you need it.
Yeah,
and
it's just like computer work. As long as everything's going along smoothly, you'll never notice.
It's like backing up your stuff.
Yep.
It's like you're never going to need it unless you need it.
Yeah, and you'll spend this kind of money and nothing will come of it. But because you've made yourself a harder target, you may be getting passed over. Things like that.
So if you do wind up in a situation where you are being restrained or held against your will or illegally restrained, whatever you want to call it, there's probably a couple of things that somebody is going to use to restrain you. You've got rope, duct tape, zip ties, handcuffs. Those are probably the top 4 on my list of what burglars or home invasion, I don't know what you call it, home invaders would have.
Yeah.
And basically that means it's all stuff that's readily available.
Yeah, it's easy to get a hold of.
Yeah, and the only thing questionable is handcuffs, and I'll get into that in a second. But so you take rope, duct tape, and zip ties. Those are all available at your Home Depot, your Lowe's, or your hardware store. You can get those anywhere, and you can defeat the biggest, baddest zip ties that are out there if you've taken the time to watch
understand
the mechanics. Yes, and you understand kind of the brute force that it takes to escape something like that. So first off, let's talk about duct tape. Duct tape is super simple to get out of, using almost basically the same technique that you would use for zip ties. So if you were bound, with your hands in front of you with either duct tape or zip ties, you would basically bring your hands all the way up over your head and come down and split your hands across your chest, and almost pretending like you're touching your shoulder blades on your back. So you're kind of chicken winging, bending over, using, as much force as you can to split that restraint, whether it's duct tape or a zip tie that's between your hands. And a lot of people get nervous about that. They don't think they have the strength to do it, but you'd be surprised. I've seen, small women be able to escape. I've seen kids be able to do it. It's one of those things where when your adrenaline is going, you are going to be able to get out of them, provided you've kind of done your due diligence and know the technique. And so you can buy some real tiny zip ties. You don't have to go buy the Chonga ones from the hardware store and be a Hulk and break out of them. It's always good to know that you can escape something that's that beefy.
Right.
But the technique is the same, and if you can break the small ones, you're going to be able to break the larger ones under pressure. So that's what I like to say too.
And we've seen that happen.
Oh yeah,
in people that weren't able to do it in a classroom setting, but then in an exercise later, completely
Yeah, I mean,
out.
we had a guy at muster that, for the life of him couldn't get out of zip ties at, in our demonstration, and then we put him under the FTX and the stress of that.
Yeah, and that's not even like
he
true adrenaline.
Yeah, he went crazy and snapped them and was very excited about that.
Absolutely.
But, so yeah, there's a technique involved with that, but then you don't necessarily have to break zip ties either. You can use something called a friction saw. So whether that's just with what you have available, like a shoelace or a piece of rope or anything, honestly, that's
pretty much
enough.
anything sturdy and rigid, like concrete or bricks. I've seen people be able to saw through them.
Back and forth.
It takes time, but
yeah. The most common thing is to use, a piece of Kevlar cordage or something, because what's great about Kevlar cordage is that when it's very heat resistant. So, and it's got a good breaking strength too. I think each strand is like 188-pound test.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's pretty strong. So using a piece like that, you would, if you were stashing something like this, you would have pre-done loops in each end of that. So you basically slip a loop onto your shoe. Let's say you were bound in front, you were sitting down. Let's set up the scenario real quick. You're sitting down, you're bound together by your hands with zip ties, so you can't spread your hands apart. And you have access to your shoe or your waistband, wherever you've hidden this piece of Kevlar cordage. You would have a bow line tied in each end of that. You would slip one end over your shoe, toss the other end over the zip ties in between your hands, and then pass it back and loop it onto your other shoe. And by bicycling your feet, you're creating that...
For about a second and a half. I mean, it goes crazy fast.
You're creating that friction to just saw right through them. It'll just melt.
Yeah.
It's great. So, and then with duct tape, it's important to understand, too, that duct tape is strong one direction but not the other. That's the reason you can tear it, off the roll when you're using it.
Super easily.
And so when most people wrap your hands, they're going to wrap, concentrically around your hands. So that breaking method will work because you're splitting it right on that axis that you normally would tear on. So it's
because you're making like
easy.
a fulcrum, which just provides such a great amount of force. And with duct tape, it doesn't matter how many layers they go, it's going to break because it's just such an overwhelming amount of force.
Yep, exactly. So those are some kind of escape techniques. And then getting into handcuffs, the reason I'm even touching on handcuffs is because they're readily available. Most people think, oh, you got to be law enforcement to have handcuffs. Well, guess what? The same
handcuffs.
Yeah,
I got them on Amazon.
Yeah, the same handcuffs that law enforcement is carrying around on a daily basis are available to absolutely anybody.
Yep. The
design of the ratcheting style handcuff has been around since 1919 or 1913 or something like that. It's very old.
Yep.
They've added the double lock since then, which is pickable as well. But there's plenty of techniques that we've demonstrated on ITS before. Whether that's using a shim or using a bobby pin, you can get out of handcuffs.
Yep.
You really can. And I would encourage everybody to understand, buy a pair of handcuffs, understand the mechanics, try to pick them with the bobby pin so you kind of get a feel for what you're dealing with. Because honestly, it could be used against you. It might not be law enforcement that handcuffs you. And if it is law enforcement, that's probably not wise to try to escape.
Because I know there are a lot of people that are probably thinking, "Oh, I would never want to do that." Yeah. But at the same time, any law enforcement officer that's had training in how to handcuff somebody will tell you that handcuffs are just one step of restraining someone. No law enforcement officer is ever going to cuff you and just put you in a corner and walk away and be satisfied that you're not going to move. People get squirrely. People can get out of cuffs without even taking them off. So they're well aware of the techniques and stuff that they can use to keep you restrained, whether you pick the cuffs or not.
Yeah, I think there's a prison video out there where a guy just freaking twists them the right way.
He uses them to break themselves.
Yeah.
But they're always watchful of that stuff. And so this is not intended to defeat any type of law enforcement restraint, including like law enforcement grade zip ties and things like that.
Yeah.
Those are just things that criminals have access to that could be used against you, so it doesn't hurt to know that information.
Right. And that's kind of what we're pitching here, is that it's important to be informed. That's really the deal. So, definitely take a look at the episode intel we're going to present in this, and you'll see some links for things that'll help you out with a lot of the things we're talking about. So,
absolutely.
And then the other thing with zip ties is that it is possible, but they're much harder to defeat when your hands are behind your back. So I like to say, if, worst case scenario, if you've run out of options and you're about to get restrained, there's some things you can do too to help with that too. So if you kind of adopt that passive victim attitude and present your hands the way that you'd like to be restrained, it can help out too. It's not a foolproof method.
No.
But when a criminal already feels that they have the upper hand and they're going to restrain you, and you're playing nice at that point. And obviously it depends on the situation of what's gone on before. If you guys have just been rolling on the floor and trying to grapple each other, and he's got the upper hand now, that might be a different scenario.
Yeah.
But just playing the passive victim and presenting your hands, there's some things you can do, like making your wrists larger. You can kind of spread your hands out a little bit so that you have wiggle room whenever they do get strapped around you. To slip out of zip ties, that's something you can do too. You can actually flex your wrists a little bit, and in the article, in the episode Intel, I demonstrate a lot of those positions. So that's definitely something you can take a look at too. So, but having your hands in a certain position will help if you're in that situation. And I'm not saying you should just roll over and play dead when you're presented with that type of situation, but there might come a point where that's the only option you have. So
yeah, well, and it depends on who you're facing. That's something that maybe they've done this before, and they're used to people being super passive. And when you red team the situation from their aspect, they don't want to be there for a long amount of time. So the restraints they're going to use are only going to be meant to keep you restrained for the short amount of time they need to be there. So maybe they're not considering to keep you for hours and hours, so a couple strands of duct tape around your wrists, or maybe it's the smaller zip ties or something like that, just to keep you immobile. And like you said, you can just kind of force their hand a little bit, not necessarily like super obvious and like stretching your hands out, but like just get your hands in front of you is a huge advantage.
And really the important thing too is to figure out the ideal time to escape too. When they restrain you and they're just turning around to grab something, that might not be the best time to escape.
Probably not the best time to find out you can't get out of that.
Right, exactly.
Well,
what are you doing?
Oh no.
Now I'm going to restrain you more.
Right.
So picking the right opportunity is good. And there's something that I was told a long time ago from an instructor that I've always remembered. It's a great saying, and I'm constantly kind of throwing this around in my head when I'm, trying to be hyper vigilant, I guess, when I'm out in, different locales and things like that. I'm always my situation awareness radar is always up.
Sure.
And the term is buddies, weapons, and options. So, meaning you're always looking for a threat for one, but when you do see a threat, where are his buddies at? Does he have buddies that are there to help him? Where are your buddies at?
Yeah.
So it goes two ways.
Yep.
And then weapons, which what do you have available to you to use as a weapon? What do they have available to use as a weapon? Are they do they have a hidden weapon that you haven't seen yet?
Right.
That type of thing. What weapons do their buddies have? What weapons do your buddies have? So it kind of goes twofold there too. And then options, meaning, do you have an escape route?
Yeah.
Do they have an escape route? What are their options? What are your options? So it's kind of twofold in every scenario. And
it's a great phrase though, because people get tunnel vision a lot and they don't even think about.
Because the best thing to do is always going to be to take yourself out of that situation.
Yeah.
We all want to be the tough guy, but honestly, if you're under a threatening scenario, you always just want to remove yourself. That's always going to be the best bet.
Well, and that's the number one thing they tell people. If you come home, your door's been kicked in, call the police.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go in.
Yeah.
Even police officers won't go in by themselves. Like there's no use in asking for that kind of threat because you don't know what's in there. You don't know if they got buddies, if they got weapons and options. Like who knows if they've gotten into your stuff. It's just not worth, I'm going to be Rambo and go in there. But, you don't, everybody gets a chance in a fight. So it's not like you're going to overwhelm the people inside.
I agree. So, that's really the take home is, what's a home invasion scenario? What are you looking at? What are your options for that? And that's kind of what we hope to present with this segment on Gear Tasting Radio. So, again, we'll put up some episode intel. We've got some companion articles that we'll toss at you to kind of get you read in on some of this a little further if you're not familiar with some of the content that we've had on ITS over the past 8 years. But, so hope you enjoyed our journey into home invasions. All right, thanks for tuning in to Gear Tasting. Remember to use the pound tag Gear Tasting on any social media network if you have specific questions for us here on Gear Tasting Radio, and we will field them Specifically here on Gear Tasting Radio. And again, check the episode intel just like we talked about in this episode. We'll have some articles that you can check out. And if you like what we're doing here on Gear Tasting Radio, please consider subscribing and head over to iTunes and give us a rating and review. We'd love to hear your feedback. And tune in every Tuesday for a new episode.